Thank you for tuning in to Grieving Voices. This is your host, Victoria Volk, and today I have Rachel Engstrom with me. Has a master's of social work. She is a certified health education specialist and has written a groundbreaking memoir self-help book on her experience as a young cancer wife, then widow. With the increasing number of young women and men becoming widows or widowers due to not only cancer and serious illnesses, but also now COVID-19, this resource is needed more than ever. Rachel shares her journey in a raw and honest way while providing step-by-step resources to help you navigate your own journey. Never before has there been a combination of the personal grit of the healthcare journey, along with steps on how to navigate treatment, diagnosis, the ins and outs of hospital life, employment, finances, insurance, self-care, grief and loss, and much more. You can find Wife, Widow, Now What? How I Navigated the Cancer World and How You Can Too on Amazon, which will be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about the birth of your book and really how this probably what started out as a passion project which was your life unfolding.
hmm
Where does your story begin?
Yeah, so I am about to be 39 and I moved here. I'm in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. I moved here in 2000, so almost 21 years ago, to go to the University of Minnesota. And I moved here not knowing one person, no family, anyone was here that I knew. And in my sophomore year, first semester, I went to a birthday party and a friend of mine, she was having a party for her boyfriend and his friend from work came. So this tall guy who's 6'2", who's, almost 7 years older than me showed up. And I just thought that he was really cute and nice and, inquired about him to the friends the next day. And he did the same about me. And we dated for 3 years. And then when I graduated from college, 3 months after that, I got my first job right away. And then I got married at 22 and he was about to be 28. And then, so he worked nights the whole time we were together. So that was pretty cool. I mean, I missed him a lot, but that was pretty cool. And that I was able to become my own independent adult person within my 20s and still have that relationship and that consistency in my life of being with him. And then when I was 28 and he was about to be, or excuse me, I was 28 and he was 35, he just really didn't feel well one day and went to the doctors. That turned into go to the hospital for blood transfusions, turned into go to this clinic. They didn't tell us it was a cancer clinic. Then he was misdiagnosed with something. And then the next day had a bone marrow biopsy. And 2 days later, he's diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. So at age 28, I'm already grappling with a few months before that, learning that I have endometriosis, cyst, whatnot, that had ruptured on my reproductive organs. I'm grieving that I might not be able to have children, things like that. And then this couples with that. And I have to very, very quickly learn how to navigate the serious illness world, insurance, disability, all these things, which is why you list that. All of that, along with having this cancer life become my norm. So I'm working 8 hours, running back home to let the dog out, then running to the hospital for a few hours, then running back home, petting the animals, trying to pay attention to them for 20 minutes before I, pass out, rinse and repeat the next day. So that was quite a lot. So that was my life. I did have a lot of support from my parents who are in a different state. They came and lived with us for 18 out of the 27 months that my husband was sick, and he got a lot better and then relapsed, unfortunately, a year and a half after his initial diagnosis. So we had to hospitalize him after he relapsed on the day of our 8th wedding anniversary. And what was interesting is going back a year so he got sick in January of 2011. He had a fever and had to be hospitalized in August of 2011. And one of the nurses said, "Oh my gosh, you guys are still together. I can't believe you're together. This is amazing." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she told me that during cancer, and serious illnesses that in her experience of 25 plus years, she'd seen 70% of more people come back that needed medical care that their significant others left them, or the marriages didn't work out, or things like that. And that just totally blew my mind, because we knew very quickly on that this is scary. Of course, we're hoping he's not going to die, but that we're in this together. We can't afford to fight or, disagree that much, or those types of things, because this is such a serious thing. So in January of 2013, he had a bone marrow biopsy, or excuse me, he had a bone marrow transplant days after I had a surgery for endometriosis. And he had had a lot of chemo and radiation to prepare his body. When you have a bone marrow transplant, they have to wipe out your entire immune system, like you're a newborn baby, to take these stem cells from umbilical cords. That was his donor. And just the chemo, the radiation, all those side effects ultimately ripped up and shredded his kidneys, his bladder, lungs, things like that. So he was in the ICU once, was preparing for him to die. Miraculously, within a 2-week turnaround, he was out of the ICU, out of the hospital, in a rehab, was learning to walk again, do all those kinds of things. And then he went for an appointment and things kind of went downhill. And then on April 17th, I was told, I got a call early in the morning, and he said, I can't breathe. And he had been on regular like oxygen, but they needed to put him on high flow oxygen. He wasn't breathing well through the night. And then they called me and said he needed to be intubated. And he got on the phone and we said, I love you to each other 3 times. And then when I got to the hospital, he was kind of freaking out, and I asked them to give him a high dose of pain medicine so it would just knock him out. And then once he was comfortable, I was sitting in this chair, and I had 3 doctors come and tell me I'm sorry. And they said, we'll decide within 48 hours, when's the appropriate time basically to take him off life support. And 2 days later, when we're going to do this, is my 31st birthday. And 2 days after that, so then they said, okay, we'll wait another 48 hours. But I just knew within that he was gone. It wasn't even him anymore. Just seeing him slip away. And what was amazing is what carried me through significantly was my faith in God and all of those things. But I just had so much peace and so much grace within it. I was just very numb to all of it. And I believe that, the biggest factor was my faith for feeling that way. But what I later learned when I was trying to be in, learn more and be in young widow groups and things like that, what I was seeing that I didn't quite realize is I was given so much grace, and that I was able to be with him as he was dying. So many people have their significant others die in war, or, a freak accident at work, or those types of things. I was actually able to be with him. So on the 21st, I signed the papers and everything. He was so amazing. He did extra bone marrow biopsies and spinal taps and things like that for research at the University of Minnesota. So I signed the papers that morning for him to donate his body to the University of Minnesota, which is what he wanted to do. And then called our minister. It's Sunday, so he's in church. So then we had to wait for him to come, and then had the few family members that were there say bye. And then I had made a heaven playlist the night before, because I knew that he was going to die the next day. And I had them unplug him. We cleaned up his face a little bit. And then I played a playlist and held my husband, my life, my best friend, everything that I knew, as I waited for his heart to stop. So that was 2 days after I turned 31. And then I walked out of the room, and I was Rachel 2.0. I was a widow. So I had to restart, and I had to reboot my life literally like a computer, because I had been thinking I was going to have, little feet running around the house that are half me, half him. I'm going to have someone help me pay for this house. We're going to go on trips. We're going to do all of these things. So I had to figure out how to navigate all of it. The cancer part was hard enough, but this was navigating all of it. And especially with being a 28-year-old cancer wife is hard, but being a 31-year-old widow is insanely hard, because you don't know anyone else in your circle of people going through that. So ultimately that led me to the idea of writing a book. So my book, Wife, Widow, Now What, is chronological order of my Caring Bridge medical post that got emailed out to everybody, my Facebook post. And so it's my narrative between all these real-time posts. So when I'm figuring out insurance, I walk you through bam, bam, bam. This is how you do it. This is diagnosis, treatment, work. When people want to help, these are tangible ways to tell them they can help. Getting counseling for yourself, getting counseling for the patient, ways to adapt your house. I had no idea I'd be 28 and be needing to get, a shower chair and all these things. And so basically my book is a love story, but the tips and the tricks of how I navigated all the illness part, and then how I navigated all the widow part, the anniversaries, the holidays, all those feelings. And it's very gritty in that it's beautiful, but I don't sugarcoat anything. One day I may be like, oh, today's a great day. And the next day I'm like, I can't stop crying. So it's really unique in that this is the first of its kind memoir, self-help, how to merge the narrative and the realness of the journey with the medical aspect of how you do both. So I put all that together, and it was very much a labor of love and a lot of PTSD, but I'm really proud to have it out there, as there's nothing like this to help people navigate it.
It's a lot to share.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So how many years ago was this now?
April 21st, it'll be 8 years.
8 years. What has life been like since?
So it was really hard. It was really hard at first. Just for fun, just for kicks. I took classes to get a certification in grief counseling because I wanted to know about grief, the process, all of those things, learning about, ambiguous loss of suicide and, all the different kinds of grief, what people go through. My bachelor's degree is in anthropology. So just culturally, it was fascinating because I was part of this culture I knew nothing about. It's like literally being dropped out of an airplane into a foreign country. You don't speak the language, you don't know anybody, you don't know where you are, you have to start over. It was really, really difficult working 3 part-time jobs to try to pay for a house. Like I said, I thought I'd have someone help me with. Lost a lot of friends, not because people didn't care, but I think they didn't know how to adequately help. And kind of like you have, when you have a job, you have your work family of friends there, and then you leave, and then you're like, oh, I don't really talk to them that much anymore. The really hard part is about going through something as catastrophic as your friendships, your relationships ebb and flow and change that way as well. I purposely, with a lot of intent, stepped away from the cancer world, the illness world, all of that for years. Because it was just too close, too hard. There were movies that came out. I remember like A Fault in Our Stars and a couple different ones where people were like, Rachel, do not watch those. Don't even touch it. Those things are really difficult. My brother, who's 14 years older than me, told me in the very beginning when he came right before Grayson got sick, or excuse me, when he got sick, you can choose to be bitter or better. And I wasn't always better. I have a chapter called Bitter Betty. But within that, I didn't have anyone else that I was responsible for besides my pets, besides me. So I had to know that, like it or not, I had to reboot. This was my new life. And within that, I chose to surround myself with positive people. I had a couple very long-term friendships that ended up not appropriately supporting me and being very judgmental and toxic that I had to cut out of my life. Just a lot of growing pains of being this new person, this new role, this definitely not asked for role. So navigating all of that was really tough. Navigating just having enough money to afford the house and everything, that was just insanely tiring. I worked for a year and a half. I worked 3 part-time jobs, 2 with autistic children, 1 with a lady with multiple sclerosis, running all across the Twin Cities. It'd be like 500 or 600 miles a week. Navigating all of that, I forgot to say 6 months after my husband died, I had had so much pain I could barely walk. So I had a hysterectomy. So then I gave up the ability to have kids, which was another huge loss. But then, later on, victoriously, I'm in Target and walking past like the tampon aisle and just like so excited. It's the little wins. But 3 months after he died, I actually went to Alaska for almost 3 weeks by myself, took a cruise, was always like, I've seen the Titanic, tell me what you will. I will, that they're safe these days. I will never go on one. But I also didn't think that I would be a widow at 31 either. So I gave myself space and time to see nature, all these places you can only get to by boat and plane, things like that. So it was a lot of trial and error over the years. I had met my husband when I was 19. So dating again in my 30s was insane. I got hurt. I got my heart broken. I was naive. I was stupid. I didn't make the smartest choices sometimes. But I was just believing the whole time that God had a plan, and like footprints, I wasn't going to be dropped, the second set of footprints in the sand. And that's ultimately what carried me through. And also finding out, surrounding myself not only with the appropriate people, but funny TV shows, uplifting music, things like that, because there are a lot of really sad things out there. I didn't always excel at taking care of myself, so those were some learning points. um when your spouse dies, you don't want to sit around and eat salads. You want to eat cake, you want to eat pizza, you want to eat things that necessarily don't fill you up with endorphins. They make you more sluggish, but you do what you need to do. um so in time, things got a lot better. And I don't really speak about love life or anything except in my book. That's my one disclaimer. You have to read it because it's at the end of the book. That's kind of my happy ending. But what's truly incredible to me is where I am in my life now. I'm I had besides it's hard to articulate this sometimes without feeling like offending people, but it's true. Like losing your parent, losing your sibling, losing your grandparent, those things are so hard. They're so hard. But the only thing I could equate with losing a spouse to would be how I can't imagine losing a child. But losing a spouse is definitely not planned, especially as young as, I was 31, he was 37. So it's very, very tricky to find adequate support in those types of things, because when people say, oh, my mom died, or my whoever died, I understand. You don't understand. You really don't understand. It's a different kind of grief. It's more complicated. It's the person that was in your house every day. Even a year after he died, I would look at the door and expect him to walk through it. All those types of things. So what's incredible to me is that I went from being the saddest of the sad, not able to get out of bed. My reproductive organs have been taken out of me. My hope of being, a mom, and all these different things, and my husband's gone and whatnot, that I went from there to writing a book, despite how painful it was, writing a book and now speaking about the positive things I focused on, the positive things you can focus on. It will be over by the time this is aired, but right now in the state of Minnesota, I am running for Woman of the Year, trying to raise $60,000 for blood cancer. The Leukemia and Lymphoma Society did so much for me. I did 2 half marathons walking them. I'm not a runner. 2 half marathons walking them. I did one the year after he was diagnosed and one the year after he died. So in 2012 and 2014. And within that, I found friends for life, people that backed me, people that supported me. And if I can get $50,000, I can get a grant in his name. And, I'm pumped to help people, because as great as advancements are, every 3 minutes, someone's diagnosed with blood cancer. Every 9 minutes, someone dies from blood cancer. 1 in 5 people are going to get cancer in their lifetime. It's the number one childhood blood cancers, typically acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which is the type of leukemia my husband had, which usually children get or elderly people get. 80% of childhood cancer survivors of this have catastrophic, like chronic health conditions, whether it be So my husband, a year after he was diagnosed, he's 36, looks great, full head of hair, he's super healthy. No one knows he has cancer if you saw him. The steroids that he took for the first part of his treatment had rotted his hips to the point where there was a crack and the hip bone was falling out of the socket. So I have another friend that his son, or excuse me, that I met while my husband was actively dying. This person I met, because he was so nice. It was a friend through a friend, and he gave me money to stay in the hotel across the street because his wife had died 5 months before that when his twins were 3. And then 3 years ago, when the twins were 9, one of them got diagnosed with a kind of blood cancer. So he's lost his wife. Now, one of his 2 sons has cancer, and the little boy got really, really sick. His name's Jake. He's an insane warrior. Now he's fine. His treatments are done, but he's had to wear leg braces because his legs are his bones are, so there's so much that's amazing. Like the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society has cutting edge research, which actually informs other forms of cancer. Their treatments and things are helping all forms of cancer. So it's not just blood cancer I'm trying to get funds for, but these side effects are awful. We can acutely treat them when they're happening and get you into remission, but these side effects are not quite there. So I feel really privileged and proud to be able to do this in honor of my late husband, because he did these extra bone marrow biopsies, donated his body to the University of Minnesota. He wanted to help people. So in a way, I'm really proud to be able to have him live on through my story, live on in this way. And this usually does not make me cry, but I'm just really excited. He would just be pumped to know that I've turned my life into advocacy in his honor. So that's where I'm at today.
I love that. How about
Thank
you tell
you.
us a little bit about him?
Oh, he was funny. So his name is Grayson, and he was just like, gosh golly, nice, to the point where he'd say, like, I'd hand him something and he'd say, appreciate it. And I'd be like, what? He was so nice. He would ask the nurses, like, can I trouble you to get me something? And they would like fall over laughing, like, well, it's our job. Of course we're going to help you. He loved New Order and the Pet Shop Boys and techno music and going with his best friend Owen for craft beers and discovering breweries and different things. And from his best friend that I spent a lot of time with after that I was friends with anyway, but spent a lot of time with after Grayson's death, he's like, he would just, and he rolled his eyes when he told me, he's like, he would just talk about you all the time. It was just all the time. And, we really were the best of friends. And we had what I call a space age marriage, where we rarely ever fought. Granted, we didn't really see each other Monday through Friday because he was working. But, when we did have arguments, it was over piddly, stupid stuff. And I was in my 20s having those growing pains and whatnot. And as he worked nights, we didn't have a dishwasher in our little apartment, and I would want him to wash his dishes, but he couldn't wash them at night when he got home late at night because the kitchen was by the bedroom, and it would have woken me up. And then he was a serial procrastinator. So he would be so tired, he'd get up late, work, and then he'd get up at like 1:30, then have to work at 3. So I just passively aggressively would stack those dishes on a cookie sheet on the stove because they were his. But he was just a joy. He was a lot of fun. Everybody loved him. The nurses told me they fought over him, that they had everybody's index cards of patients in the room, who had who, and they would fight over who got to take care of him. And, I would bring blankets and a lamp and, different things to make the hospital room like a little home. And they would say, oh, the lovebirds are in their apartment, and, things like that. So we just made the most of it. And despite him being sick, we actually were given the gift of time, that we hadn't had our entire time together, Monday through Sunday, being able to spend time together. And we'd have sleepovers, and I'd be on my little hospital cot on the floor, and he's, 2 feet above me, and we're holding hands, watching movies and stuff like that. But he was just a really good guy. And I know that, from what I've learned, different marriages, different things, different relationships, you don't always get to have that nice story and closure where there's a death. You're left with, what was, or I wish I would have said, or I wish I did have woulda, coulda, shouldas, but not in big ways. Not in big ways. I felt guilty for a couple years because while he was sick, he would always want me to come snuggle with him on the couch, and I'd be across the room on the other couch, just insanely tired, exhausted on the couch and not wanting to move. He'd be like, come snuggle. And I'm like, well, that's the last thing I want to do. I'm so tired. So I feel bad because I'm like, he wanted that. I could have done that. But besides that, I really don't have any regrets. And, I asked him a couple days before he died. He was awake for a couple minutes, just his eyes were barely open, but, I knew it, and we had a healthcare directive and everything. But do you trust me? Do you understand what's going on? Do you understand what's going to have to happen? And, he shook his head yes. And ultimately, I was just prematurely, obviously in my head, I know that I'm, devastated. My world's been thrown a grenade. But while my mom and I are waiting in the snow for my dad to pick us up after I've left the body of my husband upstairs at the hospital, I just have these immense feelings of relief because he's not in this diabolical pain. He's not going through horrific things anymore. That wasn't really him anymore anyway. It was just what was. It was unfortunately like, you change, sounds like a really awful example, but when you get new carpet in your house and you can go look at samples and there are those remnants, he was remnants of who he was. That's what was left the last few days. He had given it his all. He had fought so hard. I had confirmed with the doctors many times, especially the day he died, there's really nothing else they can do. And within that, I had the peace of knowing in the grand scheme of things, it didn't make sense why he had to die, but biologically his body just gave out. And, God love him. He did the most that he could. And the love that I had for him and that he had for me ultimately helped set me on the path of who I am today.
Was hospice care never talked about?
No, because he was, so it wasn't a necessary thing to have because he was in the hospital. So he left our house on January 21st. He died on April 21st. So it literally 90 days, because it took 60 days for his stem cell transplant to take for the bone marrow transplant and things like that. He was like in the cancer ward. So he had that high level of oncology care specific for what he was going through. So I mean, I was pricing like walkers and stuff like that. I was thinking because he'd been to rehab and things like that, I was thinking that he was going to come home. And I had someone ask me a couple weeks ago on a different show, like, did you really think that he was going to be fine and get better? And I said, yeah. And she said, why? And I would, because we were so young, when you're 31 and you're 37, you assume, you are unbreakable, unbeatable. You feel like you're a superpower. You have the whole rest of your life in front of you. So I really did not, when you're the caregiver, the spouse, or the main person caring for someone, you don't, at least in my opinion, you don't get the luxury of believing that your person's going to be anything but fine because you're the cheerleader, you're the, manager, the captain, the rah, rah, we can do this of the ship. So I really, until they told me I'm sorry on the 17th, I really thought that he would make it. And then at that point, because he was in the ICU, that was the adequate care he needed to take care of him.
I had Dr. Chris Kerr. He's the author of Death is But a Dream. It's all about end of life experiences, and he has done extensive research on the subject, and he's part of that docuseries on Netflix called Surviving Death in episode 5. And you might find that episode interesting just because he talks a lot about the medicalization of dying. So that's why I was kind of curious on the hospice aspect of that.
Sure.
So what are some of the things that I know you kind of spoke to, like some friendships fell away, which naturally often happens with grief. Um, but what are some of the things that were helpful to you that people shared with you or said, and some of the hurtful things too?
Oh, yes. Well, the I know how you feel is really hard. I had a lady that she was very sweet, very well intended, and she was a lady in her 60s from church that helped do a fundraiser, different things for me. But so she would come and I never let her in my house because I know she would never leave. She would stand on my porch and come and check on me and different things like that. And she kept telling me, like, oh, I know how it feels. I know what it is. I've been there, da 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 da. She told me how she lost her mom and she was saying she was a widow. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Da, da, da. After like 4 or 5 of these visits, it turned out like she was like, oh no, I'm married. It's just my husband volunteers at church so much. I feel like a widow. And I was like, oh,
Wow.
just like I just wanted to slam the door on her face. I think the toughest thing, I had someone really close to me in my life tell me after about 6 months, just decide to be happy. Just like pick a day and decide to be happy. I think it's really tough when people don't realize that grief doesn't have a start and end date. It's on your own timeline, especially with everybody's grief journey is different. The circumstance of death is often very different. You could put 10 people in the room and they all have different ways someone died. Um, Mine, being able to be there with him, like I said, for me made it a lot easier. And what was interesting is his PA is why can't I think of it? What the acronym is? Physician's assistant, who was his like junior doctor. She was the one that after he was unplugged and everything, I laid down next to him and she covered us up. And because I laid there and waited an hour for his heart to stop. She said, give me your phone. I said, why? And she said, let me take a picture. And I said, no. And she said, yeah, you're going to want this. And she was right, because I wanted to look at these horrific pictures of what he looked like to really get and formulate that's not him. He had to go. Um, but yeah, it was just really interesting to know and see what it was for me versus what it was for other people. Um, Being part of those widow groups online, different things like that. Um, it just sounds, I'm having a hard time articulating this because it just sounds very odd, but like there was a woman in the group that her husband, apparently she was like barely 5 feet tall. Her husband came home from Afghanistan, and one day her 10-year-old son found him hanging in the garage. And because she was so short and he was already like 5'3" at like 10, they were trying to get him down. So she had her 10-year-old son cut down dad. And it's just, there was someone else that it was her husband. She knew he was really sad, but she was like sitting on the front porch and she'd been out there maybe like 5-10 minutes. And um, her husband came out and said, hey, come, I'm going to take a nap. Come lay down with me on the bed. She found out after laying down with him for like 20 minutes, she thought he was taking a nap. Underneath like the pillow or something like that, he had taken a whole bottle of pills. This is another soldier that came home. So he had died and she had no warning and she knew nothing. So listening to those things, it made me feel better in people's grief. And that sounds awful, but it's like you compare your situations and those things that I just felt so extremely grateful to have been with him. And I mean, I had no words for these people. These are the most catastrophic, tragic, horrible things to happen. And when people are trying to tell you, you need to be happy, or you need to move on, or you need to do this, a lot of people are really well intentioned, but they want to help and they don't know how to help. And that's what I'm trying to do with this book. Whether it's you or your family or a friend or a friend of a friend or whatever, I have ways to talk to people, ways to help people, ways just to be more sensitive, because grief is such a taboo thing that so many people don't know how to talk about. I think the most helpful thing people did is just listen, be willing to listen. A few weeks after he died, I created a healing blog, which was this like maybe 1/3 of the people that I had on Facebook, where I would just kind of bleed on paper and write how I was feeling and be open and honest. And I have all these posts as well in the book as they're happening in real time. For me, it was just really helpful to feel like I was getting it out to the world. I wasn't holding on to it. And just having people respond, I'm here anytime, or, those types of things. I initially thought of calling this book a few years ago, and I thought of it, how social media saved my life, because it really is. I mean, even, pre-COVID, we're all very isolated. We're all very stuck to our phones and all of these different things. But if you can feel that support, those types of things, that was really helpful. And it was really, and I write about this as well, it was really hard for me to ask for help. You have a lot of pride, and it's really tough, but you're the spouse, you're the caretaker, you're the team captain when your person's ill and you're taking care of it, and you are glad to be giving updates and asking for help because you can only do so much. Later, when it's you, I felt like a hamster that had lost my wheel, but I was still running because I was so used to taking care of him and needed to know all these different things. So when it came to taking care of myself, it was a lot harder to ask for help. And I ended up posting in this blog a few times, like, will someone text me or call me, or, someone came and took me for a walk. Yes, like a dog. Like, she was like, I left my dog inside and she was like, Rachel, let's go for a walk, put on your shoes, come on. So I think the biggest thing I had to learn the hard way is just asking for help and knowing that it's okay not to be able to do it all yourself. That's the thing about being a caregiver, is a lot of people shelve their needs. I think I was about 50-50. I would go to a concert every now and then, or a friend would come for a cup of coffee to the hospital or whatever. But it's really tough to realize, this is me now. Nobody else is going to be able to do it. You got to suck it up. You have to do it. And within doing that, ask for help. And like today, present day, I have alarms on my phone that I have set to check in with different people that are going through some tough things, so I don't forget in my busy life checking in with them like I had people check in with me. So those are, I would say, the biggest takeaways and things that were said that were helpful and that were not.
I like that last tip. So what is one tip that you would give? Well, I think there's a lot of tips actually rolled into that too for other people hurting and going through something similar. Um, what was the best piece of advice that someone, well, you said was your brother that gave, right? Was your brother that
Mm-hmm.
told you to be better or better?
Mm-hmm. That was a really good one. What was really helpful to me is I had an aunt tell me, like, when I was like 6 months out. So I would have this count up, I guess you could say. So each month after his death, like the day to the, every month after he died. So it's like May 21st, June 21st, da, da, da. I got more empowered and excited as the months would go by, because I would be just excited that I'm making it, I'm surviving. And my aunt said something like, I was just like, oh, I wish I could speed this up. Da, 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 it's so hard. And she said, this is so fresh. You have to give yourself time. And I think people don't realize. So I'm 8 years out. And on his death anniversary, I used to have like my sisters get together, or I'd go to a friend's house, like people that actually knew him. I would spend time, go do something fun. This year I'm just working. It's been 8 years. I'm very displaced from him in that, within writing about it so many times, but I've worked really hard to get here. Of course, he's dear to my heart, the reason I'm doing all of these things, but I've successfully moved on. Of course, it's taken a ton of work to get here, but I think that, just knowing that, doing things on your own timeline, doing what works for you is the best thing. So I remember watching Friends and Everybody Loves Raymond and Frasier and things like that, and just belly laughing and being like, I can have joy, like realizing these things about yourself, creating these new traditions, creating these new things. That's not, the easiest thing to do, but doing that is great, because when you are 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, that's still really fresh. And I think that having my aunt say that to me let me know every bit of laughter I had, like those were gems to put in my little bag of I'm making it, I'm being successful, those things that it does take. It's like a staircase. It takes, and you don't know where the top is. It's going into the clouds. So I think that um hearing that little bit of wisdom helped me rephrase my urgency, because you just want to get it over with. You want to feel better. You want to zoom into this place, and that's not really a tangible thing.
I want to circle back to like all the different losses that you had mentioned earlier and like the groups and stuff. And I think it's easy for people on the outside to make assumptions too that it was it's a loving relationship, right? That
Yeah.
whomever you lost was a loving relationship. But I feel the need to bring up that sometimes that's not the case. And
Right.
so, especially if you're someone that is going to say something like, um, let's see, for example,
They're in a better place now.
yeah, or I mean, just some of the things that people say. It's like, well, you don't even know. We don't know what the intricacies of the relationships are like, right? We don't know behind closed doors how the relationship really truly was. We know people for what they show us.
Right.
And so I don't know, I felt the need to bring that up that sometimes you can lose a spouse, but it might not have been a loving relationship. They might be relieved because
Yeah.
they were being abused.
Right. Hmm.
Um, so I just wanted to bring that to attention. I just felt like I had to. I don't know why.
Yeah. No, it's very true.
Um, so I mean, it sounds like grief has taught you a lot, as it does for all of us.
Hmm.
Even me, 30 plus years out of my own losses. Um, What gives you the most joy, though, today?
That's a loaded question. Well, my faith in knowing that I went through the toughest thing possible, and not that I want more. I'm hoping that, like I said, I'm about to be 39. I'm hoping that the bad stuff happened when I was younger. Knock on wood on my fake wood desk here. But that, not that I want bad things to happen, but I'm like, here I am, hear me roar. I've been through the worst thing ever. And since I've been through that, I know that I can get through other things as well. I was eating like ice cream before bed, like almost every night for a couple weeks, like a couple years ago. And I was sweating at night, and I didn't know the correlation between like your sugar levels, and then you cover up with covers that if you have that before you go to bed, it will make you sweat. And sweating at night is one of the signs of leukemia. So, I'm panicking like, oh my gosh, do I have cancer? And I'm going to the doctor, because it's all these things that from being there. And just knowing that you need to take everything as it is, as the day. Things totally change. God says, if you make plans, He laughs at those plans. You really can't pre plan too far ahead. I think that brings me a lot of joy of living in the moment, being there for what's going on. I'm a planner, but being able to step back and, check myself on that. Um, 5.5 years ago, I started a job at a new place that launched a new life for me. And 2 weeks after I had dental surgery, took antibiotics that ripped up my GI tract. And then I was diagnosed with IBS and a colon disease. As awful as that was, because I was very sick for a couple of years, I've become an amazing chef and baker. I was good before, so that makes me really happy. Sometimes it's really annoying because I have to make everything from scratch, but I really enjoy baking. I really enjoy cooking. Here in Minnesota, it was 80 the other day. It's been raining, but I'm trying to get out and hike and do those things. And physically, I can't do as much as I could with the digestive things. And I still have endometriosis because I still kept one ovary. But, getting out, being outside, walking my dog, the same dog that she's 10, she just turned 10, that's been with me. I talk about in my book since we got her as a rescued puppy at 4 months old when my husband was first sick. All these little regular normal parts of life just make me really happy. And knowing that, um, you know, whatever happens, however, I will gladly take IBS and a colon disease because I've seen the cancer world. I've been in the hospital. I've seen it all. Being able to, I feel like I just have this wealth of knowledge and experience of I've seen the worst. I've had the worst thing happen, and knowing that whatever may come is, much as I hate the cliche, like it could be worse. It really could. And what brings me joy is to know that the experience that I have can truly connect me with people, to tell them, I am so sorry. It doesn't make it easier. It doesn't make it prettier. It doesn't make it more fair what you're going through. That's so tough. And I've been there. And, within this book, I just want to get it into millions of hands because when you're in it, you really do feel alone. You really do feel isolated. And, I'm just really proud of this book by the grace of God to be able to give people some tips and tools of how to navigate it. And you can see, I had this amazing love of my life and my life went poof, poof. And then it took a while, but it went back up. And now I'm just excited to help advocate and tell people I went through it. I'm okay. And you'll be okay too.
Is that what you would like to scream to the world?
Yes.
That is what, that's, really the premise of my podcast and why I wanted to start it too, is that the education piece that,
Mhm.
bring this topic to the forefront and talk about grief like we talk about the weather, make it just an open conversation that we feel we can have with each other and without criticism and analysis and judgment. Um, and that there's hope. And that's why stories, like yours and other guests that I have on my podcast, that's the whole point, is to show that there is hope. And yeah, is there anything else you would like to share?
I don't think so. I feel like I put a lot, there's a lot on the table for people to think about. There's a lot on your buffet.
I think just through story, people, that's how people see themselves, is through other
Yeah.
people's stories. And, we all grieve at 100%. There's no half grievers, and it doesn't matter what your loss is. It is hurtful to you, regardless of what it is and what caused it. And it doesn't need to be a big T trauma loss to deeply impact you.
Mhm.
And can we speak to the whole, because this isn't the whole point of you being on, but I do feel it's a topic that it actually is a topic that has not been covered on my podcast, but knowing that you will not be a mother, um, how have you navigated that?
Yeah. So I actually looked into adoption and different things like that. And it was just, I feel like it sounds stupid, but the expense of it was something that I couldn't afford. Um, and, um, I'm an aunt. I have four nieces. One of them just turned 15 the other day. There are almost 17, 15, 11, and 11. And I actually was a professional nanny raising babies and things like that. I see Gerber commercials, all that kind of stuff. It's tough. I had to take some time off social media, because I'd see people with their happy couples and babies and things like that when I was grieving. So I think abstaining from those things is smart because we all compare. You can't not compare. I do still to this day sometimes grieve it a little bit, but I also know that the amount of time and energy that I'm putting into advocacy to help other people, I wouldn't have that time if I had a child. So this is my baby. Trying to help other people is my baby. So I'm okay with that.
And that's a beautiful reminder too, that the fastest way to help ourselves heal is to put our energy to others. to feel
Yeah.
better. Probably the quickest
Hmm.
turnaround you'll ever get to feeling better is to focus on others and
Yeah.
helping
Yeah.
others. Yeah. Um, well, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Sorry I put you on the spot. It just is something that
No,
has not
no,
really
no,
been
it's
talked
okay.
about. And I know I can imagine that people have said all kinds of things. Well, you can
They're like,
always
oh, you're
adopt or
young, you can adopt. And it's like, I don't think people realize it's like minimum like $40,000.
yeah.
And, I have several hundreds of dollars a month in student loans and, all these things. It's just, it's not easy. And it's very, I mean, the mental health aspect, it's very complicated as well with an adopted child and all of these things. And I've already been through some really hard things. So,
Yeah. And I think too, like people might assume if you don't have kids, if you're of a certain age and you don't have kids, we can make these assumptions of, well, either you can't or and if you choose not to, there's plenty of people out
yeah.
there that choose not to. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I have many
That's
couple friends that don't. And it's just, it's a choice.
and it almost seems more offensive to other people, that oh, you choose not to, but yeah, we project, don't we? We
We
project.
do.
Yeah, we're a projecting society. But I hope that through just talking and having these conversations that we can just bring some compassion to and know and leave the assumptions at the door, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Anything else you would like to share?
No, so you can find Wife Widow Now What. Victoria will have the links, but you can find it on Amazon and it's in paperback. You can actually write in the budget sheet, finances, all these different things. Or if you get the ebook version, you can actually click on the hyperlinks and they will take you to all the different websites to navigate what you need to. And then you can find me, Wife Widow, well, Rachel, but Wife Widow Now What on Facebook and Instagram. And you can ask me questions, anything you want. I'm open.
All right. And I will put those links in the show notes. And, to the organization that you are currently raising money for, that will be over probably by the time this airs, but I will still put the link for that if you wouldn't
Yeah, you
mind
can
sending.
still donate.
Yeah.
Very, very needed.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here,
Thank you.
Rachel,
Thank
for
you.
sharing your story. And remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.